Okay, welcome everybody to another video of Film Addicts. This is Chili.
And I'm Kent.
And we just finished watching Reservoir Dogs. We're doing a series on the TCU of Tarantino films. And before we get into this, please don't forget to hit the like button, comment on this video, share this video. And if you still haven't, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell for updates. Okay, so with that out of the way, yes, we did True Romance last week, and so now we are doing Reservoir Dogs. And what are your thoughts on this?
So, out of the Quentin movies, this and Pulp Fiction I've probably seen the most times. And we were debating which would come first. Technically, Reservoir Dogs would come first, the more we thought about it, then True Romance. But they kind of seem like they happen so close in time. It's like you're not really missing a beat. It's not like... That's what's interesting. It's not like you need to know anything when it comes to like the Quentin movies. Like I didn't really know they were all tied together until very recently, because they're loosely tied together. Yeah,
because there are two universes. I mean, how Quentin described it. There's the movie universe of like all these characters are together, and there are those films, and there are these films that these guys would watch in their spare time. So, you know, so like Mr. Blonde would go watch Death Proof in the theater, and it would be that other universe. And so this one is actually kind of connecting some of the, Alabama from True Romance, but Vic Vega, who's played by Michael Madsen, Mr. Blonde, is the brother of Vincent Vega, John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. And he also kind of bring out in the deleted scenes about the Bonnie situation. So they were going to bring Mr. Orange to the nurse, the black nurse. Mm-hmm. And so you already kind of see that, you know, he's kind of pieced all this stuff together. And Scagnetti is kind of brought up. Vic's parole officer is a Scagnetti who's brother is the DA, who's a natural born killer. So there you go. I mean, there's a lot of connections already from that. This film, I like the way it was the first one. It was like it's more like a play, and it's sort of done differently than most gangster films, where most of them they're building up to the big heist, where this one the heist is already done. And you don't see the heist, you just kind of hear about it, and you kind of piece different things together as you're watching it, as each of them are describing it. And there's a rat in the group, you know, and it's really kind of cool how he put it together. And there's backstories on each of the members of this gang, and you know they have to try to weed it out who is the one, because it was I thought that was really interesting how they did it that way, how you don't see the heist. It's probably the only gangster movie where you don't see, you know, the actual bank robbery or heist that they did for the diamonds and stuff like that. So that was really cool, very different take on it.
I think too, when it came to the movie, it's technically only an hour and
40 minutes. It was really quick.
Yeah, an hour and 40 minutes.
And he still had his little trademark kind of chill kind of kickback scenes where the conversations are kind of loosely kind of just, you know, it's sort of like a hangout film, you know, on some of the scenes. Like even from the very beginning, they're talking about Madonna's songs and what this is about. Just kind of bullshit kind of conversation that, you know, gangsters wouldn't usually have, but you don't know what they're talking about, but this is the kind of shit they're talking about. And they kind of bring in about the radio
That's what's
station.
Cool. It's like they have it's a natural conversation, right? Because when it comes to a bank heist type of movie, you would think the dialogue's all about the bank heist.
Right.
But they're
talking about Madonna.
Yeah, they're talking about Madonna.
Her songs.
Quentin's character, Mr. Brown, in the beginning while in the restaurant, is rambling on about Addicts. That was an interesting way to start a movie.
Yeah, just them having a conversation because they're about to do the heist,
Yeah.
right? They're all getting together, and it's not linear how this is shot. It's going back and forth like a puzzle, but then it's easy to follow.
A lot of fingers being pointed at each other, internal squabbling in the group. I really liked.
I like Mr. Blonde.
Steve Buscemi.
I thought Mr. Pink was cool.
Yeah, Mr. Pink was right about everything. And then once you've already seen the movie and you go back and you watch it again, you get even more frustrated. I always get frustrated because I think to myself, like, Mr. Pink, just bounce.
Right.
These people, like, because he throughout the whole entire movie, he's like, we're professionals, and everything it's all going down
I
in the
think
most
it's
unprofessional
Mr. White.
way.
It was Mr. White kind of fucked everything up.
His White Knight
he got kind of
complex.
Yeah, he got all emotional, and that's what fucked everything up. And I like how how because they don't know anybody that he couldn't pull off. Mr. Orange couldn't pull off his little story. At the end. Because I was just like, it didn't work. It didn't fit. We already saw the backstory, like how Mr. Blonde is connected with, nice guy Eddie and his dad, and so it's just like, yeah, he ain't gonna fly.
What's cool too with this movie, the budget was only like $1 million, and I remember watching this in film studies in high school, which was interesting that we got to watch this in high school film studies, and the budget was like $1 million. Quentin had to like raise this money up. It was like this fundraising thing to get the $1 million, and at the time, I suppose the average budget was like around, for big movies, around like $50 million. Right?
50?
Like $50 million.
Damn.
And like there were times where it went up even above that. And for a measly $1 million for that movie, I don't know how well it did, but obviously it's like a cult classic, and it reminds me of, like you said, it was like a play where less is more. Like if you can have great actors and great dialogue, there doesn't need to be non-stop explosions and violence.
Right.
And just it was like the emotions were tense. That's the best way to describe the movie. It was a tense feeling throughout the entire movie. It was because you don't know, when are the cops gonna bust in? Are they gonna leave?
Well, then Mr. Orange does kind of talk about it, and another thing is about even like the torture scenes are like the camera pans away from the big scene with the ear and everything. You know what I mean? Unlike movies like big Hollywood films like this Heat, where they're putting it together, they're gonna do the heist and everything, and then after that everyone breaks off separately, and that's been done so many times.
There are things that are unpredictable too, right? I haven't watched it in a while, and one of those.
It was good to see it.
One of those things that still gets me is the way Mr. Blonde is torturing the cop, right? And when he gets shot up by Mr. Orange, and Mr. Orange reveals that he's a cop, right? I knew Mr. Blonde was going to die, but leading up to that, it just, like, you don't really get any you don't see Mr. Orange isn't like reached for his gun and
right.
Isn't aiming. It comes out of nowhere. Like the first time I saw the movie, I was like, what the fuck just happened? And when you have Eddie come in, because he's good friends with Mr. Blonde, and he says, you're telling me this guy did 4 years, and they were dangling everything in front of him to give up my dad, and he comes back, begs for a job, just to fuck us over, and like his face while he's talking about it, it's not even so much the story, because the story is great, but just the acting, the interactions in Reservoir Dogs. I think there are better stories from Quentin, but I think in terms of acting, it's hard for me to say which Quentin movie has better acting.
This one definitely had, some top-notch acting. I even thought Mr. Blonde was really good, and just the little details that they put in, like when we're watching them pick up Mr. Orange, and he's listening to country music, or just these little things that he turns off his stereo, and it's just like, so you're getting a little glimpse on just little details about people, and then the way he interacts with them. He's kind of awkward, while all the other three are kind of like...
They have a wavelength that they're all connected to.
Yeah, because they're all kind of, they're thugs, and he's still just kind of like you can see how awkward he still is with them and stuff, you know.
I thought it was cool too that the cop, right, even though he got his ear cut off, he's like, yeah, I know who you are.
Yeah.
And
because he's new.
And he's new, but he still had his back. I thought that was crazy. That was crazy for him to go through all that torturing to kind of have that code of ethics.
Yeah,
where like that's my brother in arms.
Yeah.
There's just great connections between the characters, and the way I saw Mr. White, it was almost as if I don't know what his background is. They didn't allude to him having a kid or anything, but it almost seems like he's lived this life of crime and he's on his way out. Like this is one last big job. And that's how I almost.
Well, they kind of known each other, but then they were kind of piecing it together.
Because he's treating Mr. Orange kind of like that's just some kid. Like he has love for him in a way.
Because he got shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. And then
that could have been the only time he saw somebody get shot, though.
But the thing is, though, I know. But for the fact is, though, is that we didn't see him get shot by cops. That was the one thing, and still he was like. Yeah, he just.
But you assume that he got shot by cops until once it shows it, then.
And then he shot the
You're like, okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Because at first, you think to yourself like, Mr. Blonde, when he was going all crazy shooting up everybody, did he accidentally shoot him? That was the first initial thought I had. Then I thought, where's the cops, right? And when you see the scene with the car, the lady had a gun in her purse, like, oh.
Yeah, because he even saw Mr. White shoot those other cops, and he's just like, oh shit.
Yeah, that was a badass scene. Double pistols.
Yeah, and so he just still had to lay low and like still pretend and whatnot. But yeah, as far as this one and True Romance, which one was better?
I think they're two different movies.
Yeah, they are two different movies, but however, I thought there was a lot more. I like this film it keeps you kind of interested the way it's shot and the way the development of the characters through the backstories of them. It all comes into play at the end.
In terms of like what is like the most well put together, like in terms of everything coming together.
His style.
In style, I think True Romance is a whole lot of fun and I love it and it's a blast. But in terms of what I could see really playing out a certain way with these guys, I don't know, they're two different movies. I like them for different reasons. I think the acting is better in Reservoir Dogs, but the amount of entertaining scenes, I think there's more entertaining scenes in True Romance.
Yeah, there was. This one is more of a suspense, kind of just like, kind of figuring out. But I mean,
if I was gonna, this is what I would do. If I was gonna show somebody a movie for Quentin Tarantino that doesn't really know his movies.
No, because that one, True Romance, he didn't direct. He just wrote the screenplay.
True.
So that's why it had some elements of it, but not as much as this one. I mean, the holding out, hanging out scenes and whatnot. You don't really have that on True Romance. Only that scene with Christopher Walken and the cop Dennis Hopper. That was probably as the best scene in there as far as it goes, as far as a little Quentin Tarantino exchange and dialogue. But this one had quite a few of them, like especially when he was telling the scene about the commode. And he had to like prove to them like
this movie means so much. So I'm trying to separate Quentin from like the mythos of all his other movies and everything that comes along with it, because this is a big part.
It's the one that started.
So if I'm trying to think about it by itself, and it's still great. It's hard for me to give what rating would you give it, and then I got to still think about.
It's a perfect film, and especially the way he started. I mean, as far as the introduction to him. As far as the way he shoots and the scenes that he does, which we'll see more in Pulp Fiction, how that scene where he's just like, okay, where Mr. White is all telling Mr. Pink to go meet with him and we're going to discuss this, like what the fuck happened. They kind of do that in Pulp Fiction. He's all, let's get into character, or they where Jules and Vincent are talking about, before they get to make their, entrance, they're talking about foot massages or some bullshit, right? They're just kind of hanging out scenes. They did that here, and you're getting a feel for that, and you're getting a feel for the music that he chooses in his movies. You know how they're kind of odd, but they're like, it makes sense, and I mean that scene where he's torturing him, and then you hear the Steelers Wheel song. It's just kind of like a juxtaposition. It's just like, that's kind of a weird thing to play and dance to. And it kind of shows us how psychotic he was. Like he goes, I don't care. I'm gonna torture you anyway. He didn't give a fuck, and just kind of he just had this kind of resentment of just being locked up and just not liking cops, and he's just it doesn't matter. I thought those little things like that were kind of just like shocking at first. Like, well, that's kind of trippy, and you get more of that in the, with Pulp Fiction, where you get, like Marcellus. They brought up Marcellus too, right?
It just seemed, it reminds me of, you have a vinyl channel. It reminds me of an EP, an amazing EP, right?
Yeah.
But then I think about like the full-length albums that are amazing, right? Like Pulp Fiction and some of the other ones.
Well, this has a good soundtrack.
I'm talking about like in terms of like not the soundtrack. I know it sounds confusing the way I worded it, but I know this would technically be considered an album if we were going to compare Quentin movies and stuff. It would be a studio album, but what I'm saying is it reminds me of like an EP.
Because it's short.
Well, because it's short, and also because it alludes to where they're going, but you get more when the production's bigger, right? So that's why I'm looking at it when I'm thinking about rating it, where I know that it's beautiful and solid,
like
but I'm
album.
Since I've heard all those other albums that Quentin has made, it almost leaves me wanting more, because there's so many scenes that are over the top, and you get some over the top scenes, but this is just when you start to get a taste.
Yeah, this is like Bleach from Nirvana, and then the next one is Nevermind. It's just like it's big production, it's just polished.
If I give this an insanely high rating, I feel like I have to give Pulp Fiction a higher rating. I don't know. We haven't done a rating the Pulp Fiction one yet. I'm gonna say out of 10. I'm varying back and forth, but I'm gonna say
out of 5 stars.
10. I said 10. Out of 5 stars, I'm gonna say 4.2.
4.2.
Yeah. I wanted to give it more, but I'm just thinking about 5 is like best of the best, and there's some other movies I like from Quentin more than Reservoir Dogs, but it has a special place in my heart.
It's a 4.5 for me. It's just, it was like, when this came out, it was like nothing like it.
I don't want to spoil it for like any other videos, but
it didn't bring, there are people that you didn't, you kind of recognize, and that was the great thing, because they all kind of got started in this film, as far as like, okay, you've probably seen Michael Madsen somewhere, or Tim Roth and co-starring roles here and there, but and Harvey Keitel, that is kind of like an actor you've seen since the 70s and whatnot, but it was because of that, I guess. It's just that they didn't bring in the star power in here, like Bruce Willis, or like in Pulp Fiction and stuff like that, Christopher Walken, and so you really don't. When directors do that, you really get connected with the characters more than, say, bringing in a star power kind of actor.
I like the laughs for the Quentin movies. I don't think this one had a ton of. There were some moments, but compared to the other ones, I like the dark humor, the dark laughs.
There had some dark humor.
But compared to.
Yeah,
I can bring up some
because it wasn't
scenes.
that long. That's another thing, and so the interactions and stuff. I thought the first scene when we're introduced to them at the diner was great.
It's a cohesive story, though. It's all well put together. Everything makes sense the way it all played out.
I like it more than True Romance, though. I do, even though True Romance, like you said. I mean, it was a great action-packed kind of thing.
What I
but
loved
just
about
felt
True
this-
Romance though is it was like I said, it was a romance movie. There was a bunch of drugs involved. There was a bunch of action. There was wacky scenarios playing out. There was good acting. We got to see amazing actors and the chemistry between them. There's not much else that I could have wanted out of. You got Gary Oldman. There's not much more that I could have asked for with True Romance. I mean, True Romance and Pulp Fiction, for me, are very, very, very.
That's another thing too with that movie. What was the director's name who did Coming in a Body Bag? I forgot his name. Donowitz or something like that. But he ends up being the son of the Jew Bear in Inglourious Basterds. So there's that connection with that.
We'll need to make a video where you have like
the graph.
Yeah, just like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you can have your little the little map, the lines. This connects to that one, to that, and that, and that, and that. Here's the tree. Okay.
Yeah. So 4.5 stars, Reservoir Dogs.
4.2.
And that is our thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on Reservoir Dogs? Leave us a comment. And is it a great debut? And as far as the TCU, as far as that and True Romance, which one would you take over? Which one is better? I feel Reservoir Dogs is better. That's just me. All right.
Okay.
We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Later.